All right. So, Anthony, I heard you have a good deal story. A seller was looking to sell their building off market and instead ended up going through the listing process with us. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I sold a deal in Harwood Heights about a year ago where met with an owner and gave him a full valuation. And it went pretty well. He wasn't really ready to do anything at that particular moment. So fast forward, 3, 4 months later, um, I followed up with him and he said, I got an offer for my building. And I think I'm going to take it. It was an off market offer. The building was 9 units, good location. And I asked the seller, like, do you mind telling me where this offer is? And he said it was roughly around 1.2 million. Well, when I did the valuation, I told him he could get 1.4 or at least much closer to that number through a listing
Mm.
process. Just knowing the market and knowing the buyers that would be coming through, I was pretty confident that we could achieve that price. So I told him to come and have coffee with me and let's have another conversation regarding the property and pricing. I was able to get him to come around and to give us an opportunity to list the property, which we did. We ended up doing 2 days of tours, and we must have had 26 plus people come through. And we had several offers after tours at full list price of 1.4 million. So just by exposing the property to the market and going through our full process, the seller was able to net roughly $200,000 more, which is obviously materially higher than what he was going to do if he just sold it off market to just one buyer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, what do you think drove that level of activity to this particular listing?
Yeah, it's a great market. There's a lot of people looking to buy in the Harwood Heights and Norwich submarket, and there's just really not a lot of opportunities. The velocity there of transaction has been relatively slow over the past couple of years,
Mm.
and rent growth has been a big factor in people wanting to
Absolutely.
buy there as well. A lot of long-term owners that have had these buildings and they've kept really good care of them over the years, but they really haven't kept up with the rental market. So that leads a new buyer plenty of upside after acquisition. And I think it's just one of the factors that makes it just so desirable to be there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The suburbs are highly competitive for any listing we put out there.
hmm
Can you talk a little bit about the competition for Harwood Heights and how that drove the price?
Yeah, I think it goes back to supply and demand. There's a ton of folks out there looking to buy multifamily property in the near north suburbs, and there's just not a lot of opportunities out
Yeah.
there. So when something does come to market, people know they may not have another at bat, and they will put their best
Mhm.
foot forward and offer really competitive pricing and terms for these assets.
Yeah. Did you have multiple offers on it?
Yeah, we had multiple offers, a couple right at list price, and we were able to achieve full asking price for the asset and incredible terms. The buyer was willing to take on any issues that came up with the village inspection, so the seller had peace of mind of not having to put any additional work into the property before closing.
Yeah. You bring up a really important point or factor component in these suburban deals,
Yeah,
which are the villages. It's almost like we have the buyer, we have the seller, we have the buyer, we have the attorneys, we have the inspectors, and then we also have another party to the transaction,
yeah,
which is the village.
right.
And they are a critical component.
Yes,
I
they
mean, we
can
don't
be.
sell a building unless they sign off.
Right.
So, can you talk a little bit about the villages and how they factor in and how our expertise lends itself to a successful transaction in these villages where the pre-sale inspection and compliance becomes a make it or break it component?
Yeah, so all the villages are different. So it could be a little tricky thing to keep track on, especially if you're working in all the suburbs, surrounding the Chicago metropolitan area. They're all going to have slightly different rules and regulations and processes on how they go about the village inspection. But a pre-sale inspection is basically an inspection of the property, but before the village will issue the transfer stamps to the seller. What happens is the village will send an inspector out. Sometimes they'll have to go through all the units. Sometimes they'll just want to go through a handful, and they'll look for deferred maintenance and defects of the property that are in code violation for that village, and they'll request to have those rectified before they issue the transfer stamps, either rectified by the seller, or sometimes you can get a buyer to maybe take on the responsibility after the transaction, as long as they do it in a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Post-closing.
Yes. Yeah, I've been thinking about how it's so important in our business to know the villages and understand the nuance.
Yeah.
The nuances of each village and how many inspections they require and what the criteria are for each village, because and also to have the buyer and the seller on the same page.
Sure, of course.
It's not always possible to have them on the same page from the beginning of the transaction, because we may not have all the information as to what the village is going to require.
Right.
So just voicing that it can get rather complex.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have a broker, someone at your side to kind of steer you through the process, who knows the villages and knows the framework under which to succeed in each of these different municipalities.
Have you had any sticky situations with the villages and any transactions you've conducted?
There's always something.
Yeah.
There's always something, because it's an additional inspection.
Yeah.
And each inspection yields something, or else
Right.
they wouldn't do them.
Right.
So, yes, absolutely. And I know you have as well.
Yeah.
We all have. Because
Sometimes it's perplexing to me how different they could be, and how some villages, could look at bigger items, roof and structural issues, and then others might get hung up on like flaking paint or like a
Yes.
cracked tile
Or a
something.
door.
Yeah, or a door that needs to be
Yes.
replaced. So those things
you
are
are so right. Yeah.
luckily those are easy enough to
Yes.
fix and get done. But it could hang up the transaction just on a bunch of little
Yes,
things like that as well.
And I think a lot of owners, especially the long-term owners who have not purchased in these particular markets, maybe in decades, some of these villages have annual inspections or occupancy inspections. And I think a lot of owners, just having done this year in, year out, may believe that the inspection prior to a sale is similar, but it's quite different. It's a lot more stringent.
Yeah.
And of course, at that stage, they are essentially a gatekeeper.
They are.
Because either the buyer or the seller has to rectify everything on that report.
Right.
So,
Or else the sale's not going to happen.
or else the sale does not happen.
Yeah.
So I think the importance of the village is frequently underestimated
Yes.
in these deals.
Yes.
It's important to be aware and be prepared for going down that path from the get-go,
Mhm.
especially in certain suburbs that
Yeah.
are known to be more problematic.
Some could
or-
be more difficult than others.
Yes, yes. And, they're serving a purpose. They are, I can't really say anything against the process, because they're ensuring the quality, the longevity
Mhm.
of housing.
Mhm.
And it contributes to the strength in our markets,
Yeah. And I think a lot of it's to protect the tenants as well. that are
Exactly.
in the
Exactly.
buildings.
And so I think at the end of the day, as many hoops as we have to jump through and hurdles we have to surmount to get through these inspections and all the compliance, I think at the end it actually strengthens the market.
Yeah.
Because I think buyers are coming in, they're seeing that, okay, yes, there's a village involved. I'm going to get a building that's code compliant.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a stable, solid investment. So I think it's like there's two sides to the coin.
Well, speaking of like the village inspections and getting ready for that when property's under contract, when listing a property for sale, is there other items that you find are overlooked by sellers?
Well, it's an involved process, obviously, because we're not selling, a condo or a house. We're selling an investment.
Sure.
And the bank will look at it accordingly. And there's a whole series and process of due diligence, of course, that goes into every deal.
Yeah.
I think especially a lot of the longer term owners, they may not be as prepared to deliver, a rent roll, copies of all the leases,
Yes.
copies of all utility statements,
Right.
and T12s and P&Ls for the determined amount of time. So, yes, what are a few things that you think owners underestimate before bringing a property to market?
I think capital improvements is a big one. Is the roof in good condition? How old is it? Buyers will definitely take that into consideration. If it's an older roof, that it needs to be replaced, and that could have an effect on the price that they offer. Electric is a big one. A lot of these buildings that we sell are mid-century buildings, built in the 1960s realm, and they have older electric panels in there. And what we're finding is insurance companies now no longer want to insure these buildings with the older electric due to fire and safety measures. So a lot of times it's a big shock to a seller when they go under contract with somebody, and then there may be a big buyer credit request asked to replace the electric in the building or the electric panels because buyer is unable to get the property insured, or they are able to get insured, but they have a massive premium to pay, which obviously affects the NOI of the property and will affect the return, and they may not be as interested to proceed until they can get that rectified. Plumbing's a big one. Is there copper plumbing? Is it all galvanized? Right.
Yeah.
Any type of foundation or structural issues, leaks, water's huge. Is there water in the basement? Because even if there's a little puddle in the basement, it could just be from condensation, or maybe a hot water tank is leaking. Might not be that big of a deal, but it could spook people and thinking that there's a bigger issue here at stake, and maybe they're not as bullish to pursue the property or be as aggressive on pricing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that I think that sellers underestimate when bringing property to the market is what's their current rent roll at. A lot of these owners have owned these buildings for 20, 30 years and may have not kept up with the rental market, which is fine. And they probably have really good tenants, and they don't want to maximize the rents because they may have more turnover and vacancy to deal with, which is perfectly understandable. Buyers actually may think that having a lower rent roll may be an opportunity for them, and there's value add in there from a management play and from the opportunity to increase the rents and the revenue. However, it will have an effect on the financing of the property. So if the rent roll is below market, a buyer may actually have to put more money down to acquire the property to get the debt coverage ratio to where the lender wants it to be. So that being said, you may also deter some buyers from pursuing the property just because of how large of a down payment they'll have to put on the property to acquire it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, some buyers, it's part of the Essex marketing campaign is to show the upside.
Yeah.
But some sellers may underestimate the complexity of financing and how much money a buyer needs to bring to the table to bridge that gap.
Right. Yeah. So Karla, why don't you tell me a little bit about the Bellwood portfolio that you sold? I know you had a lot of tours on that, but it was a little tricky going through that process.
Yeah, my overarching idea with the Bellwood portfolio is that sometimes it takes time to find the right buyer.
Right.
So this was a portfolio of 36 flats in Bellwood, all owned by the same owner for decades, 3 or so decades. Bellwood, throughout those 3 decades, has changed a lot.
Really?
For the better.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of new ownerships, new owners. All right. We're seeing a lot of new owners moving into the area.
Uh-huh.
And for that reason, we had, double digits of tours within the first couple weeks of listing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we had a tremendous interest on it. But like I said, sometimes it takes time to make that.
Is there any particular reason why this one took a little bit more time?
I would categorize the Bellwood listing as sort of like a heavy value add deal. And those deals aren't for every buyer,
lighthearted.
Right? Yes, exactly. Exactly. You need someone who's not, afraid to roll up their sleeves.
Yeah.
Has a decent time horizon ahead of them. So yeah, the buyer was a very successful younger investor who saw, the upside, the future potential in this market and in these particular buildings. And after, what I would say was probably a lengthier process, we went under contract and were able to navigate an as-is deal, which is, I would say, very, very favorable in some cases to the long-term owners, like you hit on with Harwood Heights.
Right.
Someone who's at the end of their career, looking to spend more time on the golf course, might not want to be spending the several weeks on all the compliance pieces and everything, rectifying everything that might come up on an inspection.
Sure.
So it took a while to hit all those marks. I had a very good idea, and the seller and I were very much on the same page on the buyer they were looking for, and it was a specific buyer. So it did take time to get there, but I think they were very happy with the outcome.
Sounds like you found a perfect match.
Yeah, I think it was a perfect match.
Can you explain a little bit more about the idea that you guys had? You elaborate on that?
Oh.
The idea of...
Okay, so yeah, in this case, the seller was quite upfront with me at the beginning of the listing. They had very clear parameters in terms of price and terms that they were looking for. And because of that, like I said, we did a ton of tours and had tremendous activity, but they were very specific in what was going to get them to move.
So price is price. We all know he wanted the highest price.
Yeah.
But what specifically about the terms was he looking for? Because I think that's important and is probably overlooked by a lot of owners, is having really solid terms can really make or break the transaction.
Absolutely. So in this case, they wanted an as-is deal.
Right.
Like
everybody
I said,
does.
Yeah, they did not want to spend a month, like we referenced, fixing every door and every window in the building. So they needed an as-is buyer. Like I mentioned, it was already a heavy value add deal.
Yeah.
So to add an as-is to heavy value add, kind of keeps shifting the buyer pool a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to get smaller.
It got smaller, but I knew the buyer was out there. I believed in these assets and the location. These western suburbs are very strong. You're close to O'Hare. The employers are out there. The transport and easy access to the major transportation arteries are all there. So these are all strong markets. But yeah, sometimes it does take time to find the perfect buyer.
How did you get the buyer to take the deal as is?
Okay, so, every deal has, of course, the price is the primary driving factor.
Of course.
But the other levers we have are, financing contingencies and, of course, inspection contingencies. In this case, we were super close on price.
Okay.
And in order to bridge the gap, this buyer agreed to take the properties as is and assume responsibility for all the village compliance.
That's huge.
So that went miles. That bridged the gap for us, and that's what helped get us to the closing table. That's
awesome. I love to hear a story like that. I mean, a lot of times, too, a buyer may take the building as is, but they're unwilling to do whatever's in the village compliance. It's usually a seller job. So it sounds like that was the real bridge there to get the deal done.
Absolutely. Those terms were super strong and compelling for the seller,
Yeah.
and they were excited about it. I think everyone was excited about getting this done, both sides, and it went really well. It took time, but it went well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, majorly overlooked by a lot of folks that are in a position to sell. They obviously think price, price, price. They want the best and highest price. Well, that's okay, and we understand that, but terms go a long way. Like, they could really make or break the deal for the
Yes.
seller. And there's a monetary value to a buyer not having a financing contingency, or dropping their inspection, or taking on a village compliance. That monetary value is going to vary from
Yes.
seller to seller. Some it may be more important than others, but I think having those competitive terms and having a buyer, putting their best foot forward, gives you the confidence that the transaction is going to make it to the
Actually
closing table.
close. Yeah.